There's a deep human need to be seen, heard, and understood. We all long for connection, and sometimes in our vulnerability, we find ourselves opening up to people too soon, believing that their smile means safety or their presence equals trust. But emotional safety is not something you assume. It's something you build slowly over time. Not everyone who shows interest in your story has the capacity to hold it. In fact, some people will only lean in to later lean away, carrying parts of your personal truth into conversations that have no business holding it. When we share too much, too quickly with the wrong person, it doesn't lead to closeness. It leads to confusion, shame, and often betrayal. Your story, especially the fragile, unpolished, still, healing parts, is sacred. It deserves to be handled with care, respect, and reverence. The problem is, many people aren't taught how to be present for another human's truth. They haven't learned to sit in discomfort without offering advice, or to resist the urge to judge what they don't understand. So when you hand over a part of your personal life to someone who lacks emotional maturity or integrity, you're exposing yourself to harm, even if it wasn't their intention. The result is that your vulnerability gets misunderstood, minimized, or misused. Sometimes it's turned into gossip. Other times it's weaponized in future arguments. And occasionally, it's simply ignored, leaving you feeling more alone than you were before you shared. There's a myth that being an open book is always brave. But true bravery is about discernment. It's about knowing who deserves a seat at the table of your inner world. You cannot allow just anyone to wander through your emotional home, opening drawers, peeking into closets, critiquing the way you organize your pain. Trust is not given. It's earned through consistency, compassion, and emotional responsibility. And when someone hasn't demonstrated those traits, it is not your job to educate them using your own life as the lesson. Many people share out of a need to relieve their own anxiety or to seek validation. But premature sharing often leads to regret, especially when it's received with blank stares, harsh opinions, or careless responses. The moment you realize that someone cannot meet your openness with equal emotional intelligence, you feel it in your gut. It's that tightening sensation that says, "I shouldn't have said that," or "I gave too much too soon." That's your inner wisdom speaking, and it's asking you to slow down, pull back, and protect your peace. The truth is, emotional safety isn't about how long you've known someone. It's about how they respond to your vulnerability. Do they listen without trying to fix you? Do they honor your pain without making it about themselves? Do they keep your confidence without you having to ask? If the answer is no, then they haven't earned the right to hear your truth. When we confuse familiarity with safety, we often misplace our trust. Time does not equal trustworthiness. Proximity does not equal protection. The hard lesson is this: some people simply are not equipped to hold your story with the tenderness it deserves. Vulnerability, when practiced with intention and wisdom, is one of the most courageous and transformative acts we can engage in. It is the gateway to connection, empathy, and authenticity. But for vulnerability to be healthy, it must be grounded in clear and firm boundaries. Too often, people confuse vulnerability with emotional exposure, believing that being open means being fully transparent with anyone and everyone. This is not vulnerability. It's self-abandonment disguised as bravery. There is a significant difference between being open and being unguarded, and when we overlook that distinction, we end up bleeding in places where we should have been bandaging. Boundaries are not walls, they are clarity. They are the invisible lines that protect our emotional well-being while still allowing meaningful connection. Without boundaries, vulnerability becomes reckless. It invites people into parts of ourselves they have not earned the right to access. It creates a false sense of closeness, and more dangerously, it leaves us raw, misunderstood, and exposed to harm. Sharing parts of your personal life without discernment does not make you honest. It makes you vulnerable in a way that lacks structure and safety. True vulnerability must be selective and earned. When you don't set boundaries around who you let in, you invite in noise, confusion, and often betrayal. It's easy to feel that withholding personal details makes you cold or distant, but in reality, it shows emotional intelligence. It means you understand the depth of your story, and you respect it enough not to throw it to anyone who simply seems interested. People often equate oversharing with closeness, but emotional dumping creates imbalance, not intimacy. It overwhelms relationships that aren't ready for that weight, and creates a false sense of security in places that haven't proven themselves trustworthy. The act of sharing your personal life is powerful, but that power can either heal or harm depending on who you place it in front of. Boundaries are also what protect your healing. When you are in the middle of processing a difficult season, whether it's grief, betrayal, heartbreak, or transformation, what you need most is space. Space to breathe, to grow, to understand. Oversharing in that tender time can interrupt your own clarity. It invites too many voices into a space that's already full of noise. And worse, it exposes your pain to interpretations that might not serve you. The opinions and judgments of others can cloud your progress, making you question your own steps. This is why boundaries are not just protective, they are necessary. They preserve the sacredness of your internal process and allow you to move through it with dignity. When you practice vulnerability within boundaries, you create the conditions for healthy trust. You learn to test people with small truths before offering them deeper access. You observe how they respond to the little pieces before entrusting them with the bigger parts, and in doing so, you honor yourself. You create relationships that are grounded in safety, not speed. You make room for genuine connection instead of forced intimacy. And most importantly, you stop letting the desire to be understood override the responsibility to protect your peace. Vulnerability, in its truest form, is powerful, but only when it's held within the arms of strong, intentional boundaries. Every human life is a story, a collection of moments, memories, traumas, triumphs, and transitions that shape us, define us, and often refine us. These stories carry weight. They are layered with emotion, meaning, and identity. They are not casual content for casual conversations. Yet in a world that values instant gratification and external validation, the pressure to share every detail of our personal lives can become overwhelming. Social media, casual acquaintances, and even well-meaning friends can make us feel obligated to disclose what's going on in our hearts. But not every chapter of your life was meant to be read aloud. Some chapters are sacred, some moments are yours alone. Your story deserves a safe and sacred space to breathe, to heal, and to evolve. When we talk about the sacredness of your story, we're not talking about secrecy. We're talking about stewardship. Sacredness is about intentionality, about understanding that your experiences hold meaning, and that not every ear is equipped to hear them with compassion. Sharing your story is not an obligation. It is a gift, and like any gift, it should be offered with care. When you treat your story as sacred, you don't give it away freely to those who will treat it as gossip, entertainment, or information to be used against you. You share it with those who will sit beside you in the discomfort, hold space for your truth, and honor it with empathy. The pressure to share often comes from a need to feel seen and validated. You think that by telling your story, you will be met with kindness, understanding, or support. But when you give away, sacred pieces of your life too easily, you risk them being mishandled. And when someone mishandles your story, it doesn't just hurt your feelings. It shakes your sense of safety. It teaches you to question your own voice. You begin to wonder if your experiences were too much, too messy, or too complicated. But the truth is, your story was never the problem. The problem was where and with whom it was placed. Keeping certain parts of your life sacred is not about bottling things up or refusing to connect with others. It's about exercising wisdom over your vulnerability. When you choose to keep your personal life private, especially the parts that are still unfolding, you give yourself time to understand them. You give yourself space to ask deeper questions, to reflect, to grieve, and to grow. You avoid the noise of 1,000 opinions and allow your own voice to rise above the crowd. You aren't running from connection, you are protecting the soil where your roots are growing. A sacred space for your story is also a place of strength. It's where you learn to trust yourself first before seeking approval from the outside world. You become your own witness, your own comforter, your own mirror. And in that sacred space, you begin to see your story not as something to be fixed or polished for others, but as something to be respected and honored. When you stop feeling the urge to explain, justify, or display your life for public consumption, you reclaim ownership of your journey. You get to decide when, how, and with whom you share, and that is a deeply empowering act. Your personal story is not just a series of events. It is your truth, your perspective, your emotional reality. It is the lens through which you've experienced life, and it holds layers of complexity that are deeply personal. But when you share your story with the wrong audience, it can be twisted, reshaped, and retold in a way that strips it of its original meaning. People who don't understand your heart, your journey, or your values will always perceive your story through the filter of their own biases, wounds, and insecurities. They'll frame your vulnerability in a way that suits their understanding, not your truth. And when that happens, your narrative is no longer yours. It becomes a version of your life told by someone who never lived it. This is the danger of sharing too soon, too deeply, or too freely with those who have not proven themselves to be safe or emotionally grounded. When people lack empathy or self-awareness, they will project their own assumptions onto your experiences. They will fill in the gaps with stories that make sense to them, even if they are entirely untrue to you. They might downplay your pain because they've never allowed themselves to feel theirs. They might judge your choices because they've never had to make them. And worst of all, they might repeat your story to others, twisting it in the process, reducing something sacred to something small. Sharing your personal life with the wrong audience can also make you doubt your own memory and emotional responses. You may begin to question if your experience was valid simply because someone else didn't understand it, approve of it, or believe it. That kind of psychological and emotional invalidation is dangerous. It detaches you from your own truth. You might start editing your story to make it more palatable, less controversial, more likable. You start telling it the way others want to hear it instead of the way you truly lived it. This is how personal truth gets buried under layers of performance and adaptation. You lose your voice in the process of trying to be accepted. The people who are not equipped to handle your vulnerability are often the loudest with their opinions and the quickest with their judgments. They speak not to understand, but to control the narrative. They reshape your pain into something convenient for them. They label your growth as arrogance. They see your boundaries as rejection. They turn your healing into something to be mocked or misunderstood. And if you let them, they will speak over your story so many times that you begin to forget how it originally sounded in your own voice. It's essential to remember that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your transformation. Just because someone is curious doesn't mean they are compassionate. Just because someone listens doesn't mean they understand. The wrong audience doesn't just misunderstand your story, they damage it. They carry it in their hands like it's casual, forgetting that for you it was sacred. They turn your chapters into caricatures, your real pain into exaggerated narratives that serve their own entertainment or comfort. And often they share it with others, as if they were the author. In a culture where public visibility is often mistaken for significance, choosing to remain private about your personal life is a radical act of strength. We are constantly being encouraged to share, to document, to reveal, to expose, to make public what was once personal. And while transparency can build trust in the right context, constant exposure drains you. It diminishes the depth of your experiences by converting them into content. What once held meaning becomes material. What once was sacred becomes scenery. But when you choose privacy, you reclaim control. You shift the power dynamic back to yourself. You are no longer giving people unrestricted access to your mind, your heart, your wounds, and your dreams. You are choosing to protect the parts of yourself that still need care, still need processing, still need peace. Privacy is not about secrecy, it is about sovereignty. It means you are no longer allowing others to write the narrative of your life or contribute commentary to chapters they don't understand. When you keep your personal life private, you create a boundary between what the world sees and what your soul needs. And in that space, you grow stronger. You are able to reflect without interruption, make decisions without noise, and evolve without unnecessary explanation. You learn to trust your own voice, your own instincts, and your own values. Privacy becomes a place of inner alignment, where your life is not dictated by applause or judgment, but by authenticity and clarity. One of the most empowering things you can do is move in silence. You don't have to announce every plan, every relationship, every shift in your journey. When your life is not up for public consumption, you are free to fail without ridicule and succeed without pressure. You are free to pivot without justifying yourself to people who are only spectators, not participants. The fewer people who know your every move, the fewer opinions you have to navigate, and the more energy you preserve for what actually matters. Your time, your energy, your attention, they are finite resources. And when you spend them constantly explaining yourself to others, you lose the ability to direct them toward your purpose. There is a deep kind of peace that comes from living quietly, not invisibly, not inauthentically, but intentionally. It is the peace of not having to defend your choices. The peace of knowing your life is not a debate. The peace of having space to be fully human without performing. When people don't know what's happening in your life, they can't interfere with it. They can't inject doubt into your vision. They can't speak against things they have no knowledge of. And, as a result, your life unfolds more organically, more powerfully. You're not performing for anyone. You're aligning with yourself. Privacy also protects your relationships. When you keep your connections, friendships, and partnerships away from public scrutiny, they are allowed to grow in truth, not in performance. They don't have to live up to a curated image. They can develop slowly, genuinely, in alignment with real values instead of external expectations. The fewer people watching, the more room you have to simply be present. Privacy gives you the space to build something real without interference, without premature judgment, and without the pressure to package it for approval. There's a belief many people carry that to be genuine, to be good, or to be strong, they must be endlessly open. That every part of who they are must be available, explainable, and accessible to others. That vulnerability means exposure at all times. But the truth is, you are not obligated to make your life a display case for others to examine. You are not required to offer every detail, every thought, every emotion. just to prove that you're authentic. You can live in integrity. You can be honest and kind and still choose to keep parts of your story private. You are not an open book to be read by anyone who feels entitled to your pages. You are a library, and not everyone deserves a library card. There is freedom in understanding that your worth is not tied to your willingness to share. You don't owe your personal truth to every friend, family member, or stranger who asks. There are chapters of your life that only you can truly understand, and there's no weakness in choosing to hold them close. The decision to keep something to yourself doesn't make you dishonest, it makes you discerning. Every person has the right to privacy, and exercising that right is a declaration of self-respect. It says, "I am not hiding, I am honoring." You may feel pressure at times to share just to fit in, to connect, to prevent people from misunderstanding you. You may think that by opening up, you're building trust or proving transparency. But trust built on overexposure is fragile. It places the foundation of your relationships on the shifting sands of external approval. When you constantly share your personal life in an attempt to prove your sincerity, you allow others to become editors of your identity. You hand over pieces of your self-worth, hoping for validation, while slowly disconnecting from your own sense of internal safety. Being private is not being closed off. It's being intentional. It's knowing that the most meaningful parts of your life don't require an audience. They require stillness, care, and time. You don't have to broadcast your healing while you're still bleeding. You don't have to explain your boundaries to people who never respected them. You don't have to narrate your every move to those who are watching but not supporting. Your silence in certain areas is not avoidance, it's preservation. You are allowed to choose what you share and what you keep. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to protect your peace without apologizing for it. Sometimes the strongest, most courageous act is to hold your story gently within yourself until you're ready, or never share it at all. Not everyone has the emotional depth to meet you where you are. Not everyone has the maturity to hold your experiences with care. And not everyone is entitled to know what's behind the curtain. You are not required to break yourself open so others can feel comfortable. You can live your truth quietly, powerfully, and privately.